Coming up next, it's Polar Express. Polar Express continues next. Coming up next, it's Rise of the Guardians. Rise of the Guardians continues next. Coming up next, it's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory continues next. Coming up next, it's The Amazing Spider-Man. The Amazing Spider-Man continues next. Coming up next, it's Spider-Man. Spider-Man continues next. Coming up next, it's the premiere of Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man 2 continues next. Coming up next, it's the premiere of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, The Secret of the Ooze. The premiere of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, The Secret of the Ooze continues next. Coming up next, it's the premiere of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3. Coming up next, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3 continues. Coming up next, it's Lego Batman the Movie, DC Superheroes Unite. Coming up next, Lego Batman the Movie, DC Superheroes Unite continues. Coming up next, it's the Lego Movie 2, the second part. The Lego Movie 2, the second part, continues next. Coming up next, it's Tim Burton's Corpse Bride. Coming up next, Tim Burton's Corpse Bride continues. Coming up next, it's The Wizard of Oz. The Wizard of Oz continues next. Coming up next, it's The Iron Giant. The Iron Giant continues next.
Coming up next, it's Puss in Boots. Puss in Boots continues next.
Coming up next, it's Shazam. Shazam continues next. Coming up next, it's Madagascar. Madagascar continues next. Coming up next, it's the premiere of Minions. Minions continues next. Coming up next, it's Over the Hedge. Over the Hedge continues next. Coming up next, it's Garfield. Garfield continues next. Coming up next, it's Scooby-Doo. Scooby-Doo continues next. Coming up next, it's Scooby-Doo 2, Monsters Unleashed. Scooby-Doo 2, Monsters Unleashed continues next. Coming up next, it's Shrek Forever After. Shrek Forever After continues next. Coming up next, it's Shrek 2. Shrek 2 continues next. Coming up next, it's Yogi Bear. Yogi Bear continues next. Coming up next, it's the premiere of Tom and Jerry, Cowboy Up. The premiere of Tom and Jerry, Cowboy Up continues next.
Coming up next, it's Detective Pikachu. Detective Pikachu continues next.
Coming up next, it's Space Jam. Space Jam continues next. Coming up next, it's Spy Kids. Spy Kids continues next. Coming up next, it's Spy Kids 2, Island of Lost Dreams. Spy Kids 2, Island of Lost Dreams continues next. Coming up next, it's Spy Kids 3 Game Over. Spy Kids 3 Game Over continues next. Coming up next, it's Adventure Time Stakes. Adventure Time Stakes continues next. Coming up next, it's We Bare Bears the Movie. We Bare Bears the Movie continues next. Coming up next, it's Steven Universe the Movie. Steven Universe the Movie continues next. Coming up next, it's the Powerpuff Girls. The Powerpuff Girls continues next. Coming up next, it's Dexter's Laboratory. Dexter's Laboratory continues next.
Coming up next, it's Courage the Cowardly Dog. Coming up next, it's more of Courage the Cowardly Dog. Coming up next, it's Ed, Edd and Eddy. Coming up next, it's more Ed, Edd and Eddy. Coming up next, it's Codename Kids Next Door. Coming up next, it's more Codename Kids Next Door.
Coming up next, it's Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends continues next. Coming up next, it's The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy continues next. Coming up next, it's Chowder. Coming up next, it's more Chowder. Coming up next, it's Flapjack. Flapjack continues next. Ben 10 continues next. Coming up next, it's more Ben 10. Coming up next, it's Teen Titans. Coming up next, it's more Teen Titans. Ben 10 Alien Force, Ben 10 Returns continues next. Coming up next, it's Adventure Time. Coming up next, it's more Adventure Time. Coming up next, it's The Amazing World of Gumball. Coming up next, it's more of The Amazing World of Gumball. Coming up next, it's Regular Show. Coming up next, it's more Regular Show. Coming up next, it's Steven Universe. Steven Universe continues next. Coming up next, it's Uncle Grandpa. Coming up next, it's Clarence. Coming up next, it's more Clarence. Coming up next, it's Teen Titans Go! Coming up next, it's more Teen Titans Go! Coming up next, it's We Bare Bears. Coming up next, it's more We Bare Bears. Coming up next, it's a new Looney Tunes cartoons. Coming up next, it's more Looney Tunes cartoons. Coming up next, it's the Powerpuff Girls. Coming up next, it's Craig of the Creek. Coming up next, it's more Craig of the Creek. Coming up next, it's Victor and Valentino. Coming up next, it's more Victor and Valentino. Coming up next, it's Apple and Onion. Coming up next, it's more Apple and Onion. Coming up next, it's a new Total Dramarama. Coming up next, it's more Total Dramarama. Coming up next, it's a new Jellystone. Jellystone continues next.
Coming up next, it's the new show We Baby Bears.
Coming up next, it's a new We Baby Bears. Coming up next, it's more We Baby Bears. Coming up next, it's Teen Titans Go versus Teen Titans. Teen Titans Go versus Teen Titans continues next. Up next, it's Teen Titans Go and DC Superhero Girls, Mayhem in the Multiverse. Teen Titans Go and DC Superhero Girls, Mayhem in the Multiverse continues next. Coming up next, it's Teen Titans, Trouble in Tokyo. Teen Titans, Trouble in Tokyo continues next. Up next, it's the Teen Titans Go Justice League Special. The Teen Titans Go Justice League Special continues next. Up next, it's Teen Titans Go Super Summer Hero Camp. Teen Titans Go Super Summer Hero Camp continues next. Up next, it's Teen Titans Go The Night Begins to Shine. Teen Titans Go The Night Begins to Shine continues next. Up next, it's Teen Titans Go The Night Begins to Shine 2. Teen Titans Go The Night Begins to Shine 2 continues next. Coming up next, it's the Mega Music Marathon.
The Lego Batman movie continues next.
Coming up next, it's the Cartoon Show. Coming up next, it's Cartoon Fridays.
Coming up next on Cartoon Network, it's Ben 10 Alien Force.
Coming up next,
Chowder.
The freshly banned Seta Bassini di Disney Junior.
We all feel it, calling us towards the city.
But it's not gonna work. Cat Noir and I are the best at soccer.
I don't know a thing about soccer, milady. A good game is full of exciting twists and turns, like a good manga.
A winning team is a united team, united by its diversity. A team where everyone's individualities find expression and complement each other. That's the beauty of team sports.
You will use it for the greater good.
Let's go, Ghost Force!
The show's already started!
But nobody's better than you, the real MVP.
What are you waiting for, Shadow Moth? Here I am!
Trust yourself, Ladybug, like I trust you.
The team is assembled. Get ready for action on Disney Channel.
All she wanted was to find her way back.
Adrian's gone to Shanghai.
Shanghai?
Alone, with no superpowers.
Tiki?
Join Ladybug and Cat Noir in their adventures in Shanghai as they combat villains and creatures from their wildest imagination. Miraculous World Shanghai, The Legend of Lady Dragon on Disney Channel.
You want a little fun? Look out, 'cause here I come.